This conference will now be recorded.
Hello and welcome to the All of Government Rental Vehicles Generation 2 Agency Briefing. My name is Ryan Challis and I'm a Senior Procurement Specialist here at MB in the Commercial Strategy and Sourcing team. What we'll be going through today is the Generation 2 All of Government Rental Vehicles solution. So we'll start off talking about where we finished with Generation 1. We'll talk about how we approached the Generation 2 solution. We'll talk about the features and benefits of the new solution and then finish the presentation with a timeline and to discuss some next steps. So the Generation 1 solution expires on the 2nd of March 2019. Generation 1 made up a small proportion of the overall New Zealand rental market. Throughout its 5-year term with 4 providers on the panel, it received good participation, high customer satisfaction, 60 million in spend and 15 million in savings throughout the term. The solution continues to receive positive feedback from agencies. The key feedback from agencies was the limited availability of rental vehicles, especially around the December to March period where the leisure market is particularly busy. An RFP was released in August last year focusing on shared mobility services. We signalled that we were seeking to explore a range of commercial models within this RFP. We also said that we considered availability, low emission vehicles, and price as the most important factors. We sought out to explore improvements in service delivery, establishing closer relationships between agencies and providers, and to embrace a shifting market. So based on feedback from agencies, 4 objectives were included in the Generation 2 RFP. These included increasing the uptake of low emission vehicles in the aim of helping to reduce the emissions profile of government and reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero in line with government directive. To ensure agencies have access to the best pricing and levels of availability. To develop the car sharing market so it becomes a real alternative to vehicle ownership, better meeting the transport needs of agencies and the New Zealand public in the future. And finally, to deliver a solution that meets a wider spread of needs and ultimately works for more agencies. We set out to achieve these through an extension of the Generation 1 scope. The Generation 2 RFP focused on shared mobility services, which is a transportation approach that enables access to vehicles on an as-needed basis. The shared mobility services approach enabled us to address a shift in demand that required a network of transport options to better meet the needs of agencies and other potential users. We sought to recognise this evolution of customer need and use AoG spend to help develop the supply market to the benefit of the New Zealand public. While the new solution includes general rental vehicles, like in Generation 1, the scope of the solution is intended to meet broader mobility needs and so reflects emerging market trends. As such, we have included commercial rentals as a standalone category, as well as less than 1 day rentals where car sharing providers are best suited. In this presentation, we are talking about 2 of those 3 categories, general rental vehicles and commercial rentals. We are progressing at the moment with less than 1 day rentals category, which will be available later in 2019. Front of mind for us was availability, sustainability, how services could be better delivered to agencies, the customer service agencies receive as a result of the provider's account management, and pricing. We had 6 evaluators from the state sector, of which did an amazing job evaluating, moderating, and ultimately shaping the solution that I'm presenting here today. Following evaluations, we entered negotiations. As a result, we were able to deliver not only further cost savings over Generation 1, but reduced pricing for low emission vehicles, greater vehicle availability, and easy to use and manage standardised hire terms. So the table you see in front of you highlights the differences between the Generation 1 and the Generation 2 solution. So firstly, in Generation 1, we had a panel of 4 providers. As it currently stands in Generation 2, we'll have a panel of 3 providers for the general rental vehicles category and a panel of 4 providers for the commercial rentals category. In Gen 1, the term was a maximum of 5 years. In Gen 2, it will be a maximum of 8 years to help us better embed the solution and take advantage of the benefits on offer. Throughout Gen 1, providers had best endeavours to provide participating agencies the vehicles as required. However, as we all know, there were some issues with that, particularly in that December to March period. With Generation 2, government will be a customer of choice. Providers will invest greater in account management to cater to specific availability needs for participating agencies. And NZGP have improved reporting metrics to better manage and monitor vehicle availability on behalf of agencies. While low emission vehicles were available throughout the Generation 1 solution, they were usually double the price of any other vehicle. Through Generation 2, the pricing of low emission vehicles will be significantly reduced from at least one provider. Supply of low emission vehicles will increase throughout the term in line with the provider's fleet roadmaps and demand from participating agencies. There are limited types of commercial vehicles available in the Generation 1 panel. Through Generation 2, there will be a greater variety of vehicle types available through a specialist provider that we've added to the solution. And finally, but certainly not least, through Generation 1, there were provider-specific hire terms. In Generation 2, we've been able to achieve standardized AoG hire terms, so agencies spend less time trying to understand the differences amongst the different providers' terms and conditions, and ultimately are delivered a more consistent experience across the board. They are put in a far better position in Generation 2 as what they were in Generation 1 with the provider-specific hire terms. So what you see in front of you are the successful providers for the 2 categories. So firstly, we have the general rental vehicles category with 3 successful providers there, Avis, Hertz and Thrifty. We then have the second category for commercial rentals. Again, we have Avis, Hertz and Thrifty, and we have added a new provider there called Hirepool. So New Zealand Defence Force is actually a major user of Hirepool and has a great value-add relationship with them. Through this solution, we are providing the opportunity for other agencies to develop a similar relationship with Hirepool too. A special feature of this solution, and something that you'll find in the agency Memorandum of Understanding, is the opportunity for the general rental vehicles category to move to a preferred model. After the first 6 months of the contract term, NZGP will review the solution and make a decision whether to move to a preferred model for the general rental vehicles category. Now, under this model, one provider would be identified as a preferred provider across all agencies. All other providers would be identified as alternative providers for all agencies. Participating agencies would need to seek to book through the preferred provider in the first instance. Agencies would only seek to book through an alternative provider when the preferred provider cannot meet their specific needs. A preferred model was considered to have merit over a traditional panel model, especially in regards to achieving the RFP objectives. What you see in front of you are the additional benefits that would be available across providers under the preferred model if the decision was made to move to it. So this includes greater uptake of low emission vehicles through reduced pricing for the contract term, contracted 100% guarantee to vehicle availability at major locations, improved account management through dedicated communication channels and fit-for-purpose service levels, reduced costs to participating agencies with potentially 7% additional savings available on average. Now, despite all this good stuff, the general rental vehicles category will launch as a panel of 3 providers without a preferred model. This is so NZGP can review the solution after 6 months of the term and make a decision whether to move to the preferred model. This 6 months will provide sufficient time to review the solution, manage provider performance, and monitor agency satisfaction. Any decision to move to the model will be based on agency feedback and the information we receive from new fit-for-purpose service levels and performance measures. As such, we'll be taking into account things like availability, account management, and price. Should the decision be made to switch to the preferred model, a 6-month transition window for both providers and agencies will be put in place to support transition requirements. Therefore, the earliest a switch to the model, if any, could occur is 12 months from the contract start date. Now, it's important to remember that this is only for the general rental vehicles category. The 2 other categories, commercial rentals and less than 1 day rentals, will remain separate to this model. So I'd just like to take the time to reiterate and emphasize some key points to take away from this presentation. So the first one is that the Generation 2 solution is launching with a panel for general rental vehicles with 3 providers and a panel for commercial rentals with 4 providers. A less than 1 day rentals category will be available later in 2019 that will provide options for car sharing. Agencies can enter service orders with 1 or multiple providers. Following 6 months of the contract term, NZGP will review the Generation 2 solution to decide whether to appoint a preferred provider where additional benefits will become available. And finally, collateral, including a comparison guide and pricing calculator, is now available on the Government Procurement website. So there are 3 major features to this solution. The first one is greater availability, and this is something that was requested by agencies from the outset. Under a panel arrangement, government will be a customer of choice. Under a preferred model, multiple providers are willing to commit to 100% availability at major locations if made the preferred provider. Another feature, reduced pricing for low emission vehicles for the first 6 months of the term from 1 provider. Should we move to the preferred model, low emission vehicles will be discounted throughout the contract term by 1 provider. Other reductions would be available should other providers be appointed as the preferred provider. This will support agencies in following the directive from central government to decrease emission profiles over time. And the third feature, increased savings through reduced pricing in comparison to Gen 1 that we expect will drive cost efficiencies across agencies. So agencies will spend 2.5% less through the Generation 2 panel, with an additional 7% if the move is made to the preferred model, depending, of course, which provider is chosen as the preferred provider. And based on how some agencies purchase, under the preferred model, some agencies could expect to pay up to 18% less for their general rental vehicles in comparison to Generation 1. And you'll be pleased to know that the features that you can see in front of you will remain in the Generation 2 solution. So as was the case in Generation 1, agencies will need to sign a form of accession and separate service orders with the providers. Part of the reason for the short time between solution announcement and the contract start date was the time required for us to explore the preferred model. Now, instead of rushing this, we decided to take the time to ensure agencies have access to opportunities for significant benefits and that appropriate windows are put in place to ensure smooth transition should the decision be made to switch to the model. We expect the transition to Generation 2 will be relatively simple based on the similarity of providers in Generation 1 and the fact that agencies have the flexibility to sign up with potentially all providers. Should you have any issues with transition, then please get in contact with the Travel COE. The TMCs are also aware of what's going on and are willing to support agencies in their transition processes. So finally, here is the timeline. So the contract begins on the 3rd of March this year. We expect to launch the less than 1 day's rental category in July of this year, and NZGP will perform its review of the solution 6 months after the contract start date. That's the presentation, guys. I hope you received the information you were looking for from this presentation. If you do have any other questions, comments, or feedback, then please get in touch with the Travel COE. Thank you very much.